Okay, so thank you for being here today. It's really, great to have you on and to meet you. um, you wrote the foreword for my recent book, The Mother Wild Revolution. Um, and I've had a fair few people ask to bring you on and to meet you and do Q&A and just have a bit of a live discussion, which has kind of initiated me asking you to be here today. So I thought we could just kind of bounce a little bit and speak more on like the shamanic journey of motherhood and initiation of motherhood, and then anything you kind of feel to bring around that.
Okay,
Um, and yeah, we don't have anyone on, so we can't do Q&A, but we can just have a little bit of a chat over tea and
beautiful.
yeah.
Well, it's one of my favorite subjects and one that I feel so passionate about, and a world birth and motherhood, pregnancy, birth, and motherhood that I grew up in. And
Mm,
I found my way to this magnificent life season through my own experience, but also as a midwife. So,
mm,
in helping many other women um, navigate the rite of passage and move into matrescence or
mm, mm,
motherhood each time. So I've had kind of like like my personal experience,
mm,
my professional career experience, and also that included advocacy and still does. Like I'm
mm,
one of the founding members of a charity that we've set up that's part of the School of Shamanic Womancraft to prevent birth trauma. So it's
mm,
something that is like very dear to my heart, and more than anything, I know is so important.
mm, mm.
It creates the future.
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of the principle of the book, is like I feel where we're at collectively, it is really the frontier of what needs to change in order
Mm,
to grow. And
mm,
yeah, those first couple of years, or pregnancy actually, I speak about how the brainstem is really formed at birth, and that carries so much, weight in the nervous system. It really sets up our circadian rhythms and our baseline tone that sets the, the pace for the rest of our lives. Of course, we can work on that, but it's just best to get it right to begin with and to have that education. And I know I didn't, like
mm.
I had held one baby before I fell pregnant, Jane. So it was really a deep initiation for me. And I was just really fortunate that I'd done so much somatic work and really had the grounding feminine principles in place in my life, that pregnancy and motherhood was kind of it ended up being an extension of that, and
Mm.
actually reasonably easy considering I was a solo mother, which is never easy.
No.
Um, but
And
yeah,
also just saying your experience of only ever holding one baby before you had, got pregnant, like that
mm,
is sadly very common and a bit weird in our culture.
it's so weird.
Yeah, it's a sign that of like incredible disconnection with
Hmm.
the flow of life, and disconnection within families and extended families and communities, such that, as an example, you are a learned woman getting to that point with zero experience or exposure to something that is actually so normal and happening however many times every minute, and in cultures not that long ago where we all come from, it was something that we were all involved in, because
Hmm.
we know it takes a village to raise a child, right? So where's the village? That's one of the biggest problems.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that child that I held was my sister's, and she's got four children now, or having her fourth soon. And previous to that, I would just turn up and say hi to the baby and then go on my way. There was just really no attunement to the
Mm.
needs of her. And now it's like, if one of my family members is having a baby, well, I'm flying back there and cooking for them, and
Yeah,
and that's just innate in me because
yeah,
I've been through
now.
it. I know
Yeah,
it. And
yeah.
it's usually the mothers that come, I feel, to be the supports.
Mm.
Um, After birth. Well, that's been my experience. It's the
Well,
mothers that show
yeah,
up.
I think so. Like when I was, how old are you?
I am 30, turning 37.
So when I was your age, I'd had my 3 children. And when I began having my children at 27, so I've had 3, we had really tight circles of
Mm.
mothers, like we would meet regularly and discuss things or, introduce concepts or whatever. But the biggest thing that happened in those meetings, and they were more like gatherings than meetings, were women feeding their babies and watching each other and seeing how they held the baby and how they burped the baby and how they fed the toddler and all that. So learning from each other to see what worked, what didn't work, what was comfortable, and getting each other's help and support. Like without that, which is sadly where I think most women are today, they're like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, and God help those that it's just not innate in either. Like if you're already living a life that's radically disconnected from your feminine cycle, then that's an even deeper, harder
Totally.
initiation because
Totally.
it
Because,
forces you into that.
yeah, because, all that stuff before, which actually is our fertility, our menstrual cycle, our sexuality, all lead to our journey of motherhood, whatever way that shows up or happens or whatever shape that's in. So I think that's another thing that I feel a lot of women think is, and not because there's anything wrong with their thinking, because this is what they've been fed by the culture, that birth is just some random event you have to endure and get through, and you're probably going to have intervention because all you have to do is look at the statistics to see what's probably going to happen. But the saddest thing is what so many of us have missed out on before we actually consider conception, if that's a consideration, because most of the time it's just something that happens. But the menstrual cycle, one of the buried sources of feminine knowledge, wisdom, and power, is the preparation for pregnancy and birth, because our menstrual cycle is it's not a curse, it's a teacher. And it teaches us so much that's so important in preparation for birth. And when you miss out on that, you are starting from, what's the metaphor? Starting without, well, I can't think of the metaphor, but you're starting without the information
I
you're
can
meant to
never
have.
think of metaphors. Sorry, I'm really no
You
good.
couldn't help me.
No good there.
But you're starting without the prep work. You're starting without the, fundamentally, body literacy. So
Yes.
understanding how your body speaks to you. That's what the menstrual cycle teaches us. And also cycle intelligence, which is the way of nature. And, if we are just fully under the patriarchal spell, we would never have even realized there was such a thing as a cycle. It's just a forever upward trajectory in our patriarchal culture. So without the menstrual cycle, it's just the next thing on the ladder of wherever you're going, when in actual fact, it's so much more than that. Because how we give birth is not random. How we give birth is kind of predictable if you understand yourself well enough. If you know the story of your red thread, your female ancestry, if you know the story of your own birth, and not just the birth, the conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience that you had as a baby, that creates the birth imprint that we are all creating for our children when we conceive them. That stays with them forever. That's so important. And then all of everything that's happened before us getting pregnant is part of the setup for how we experience the pregnancy, the birth, and the postpartum, and then on and on and on. So without body literacy and without cycle intelligence, which is really just the way of nature, it's nothing too weird or unknowable. But without that, pregnancy can feel like some random, dangerous medical event. Pregnancy and birth, I should say.
I'm so curious to hear more if you want to share more on the imprint piece, because my birth with my daughter was so wildly different to how my mother birthed me. My mother had no painkillers. It was just a raw, very primal natural birth. She refused intervention, and so I came out as this wild force of nature. And I always feel like I have such an active Kundalini. I feel like I have so much life force, and it's really a mirror of how I was birthed into the world. But with my daughter, it was just one complication after the other, which doesn't really map to how I necessarily live my life. But it was during the pandemic, and there was just all of these external events that just kind of got in the way of allowing me to have the birth that I felt like I was going to be having, which is a whole thing in itself, you know.
Yeah, a whole thing in itself, yeah. But in terms of the birth imprint, I'll talk about that. I think this is a really critical thing for everybody to be aware of, and it's not something that they won't be experiencing, whether they're aware of it or not. So how we're born, and that the process of us becoming includes the conception, the pregnancy of us, so the pregnancy our mother had that we were growing in, and then the birth, so from start to finish, and then the postpartum, which is let's say the first moon or month. So that, as well as, because that whole story we each have, is also affected by any previous pregnancies or births that mum has had before us. Like, so for example, if there have been lots of miscarriages, let's just say, and sadly that's not uncommon, but there's a reservation a mother has at the next pregnancy of like, oh, is this baby going to stick? I don't want to get too attached because what if it doesn't last, and here I go again. So that story becomes part of the baby's story and its imprint. Or if mum's had a really traumatic birth before, then she's going to be scared that that's going to happen again. Like, fair enough, right? And then, besides that, so they're like the prequels to what's happened in mum's womb. There's the red thread story. So, you know, like, red thread story is our female generational inherited vulnerabilities and strengths. And we've all inherited it, whether we want to or not, or whether we even know it or not. And this all happens way before we're even a concept, because when you're pregnant with a daughter, so you had a baby girl, right? So when you were pregnant with a daughter, at 20 weeks, all that baby girl's eggs formed in her ovaries. So you had in your womb, in your unborn baby's ovaries, all the grandchildren that you would ever have from her in you. So that means you, me, all of us, we were actually in our grandmother's womb for the second half, as an egg, premature egg, for the second half of the pregnancy. Now, and then when our mother was born, we were obviously in her body as our most prima materia, a premature oocyte, in her ovary from 20 weeks gestation of her all the way up until we were the egg that ripened, ovulated, was conceived, and then we gestated in her womb, and then we finally left her body when we were born, and then we were fed, and during that whole time we're absorbing everything our mother is thinking, feeling, processing, doing. So this is huge and gigantically impactful, and not a bad thing. This is how our species has survived. So the first thing that happens is that when we are in our mother's ovaries as an egg, we are epigenetically tagged by our grandmother to survive. So the most common example of this is if a grandma has grown up in, or maybe even if her mother did, in famine situation, like there's really reduced amounts of food and like a lack around. So if a grandmother's had that experience, she epigenetically tags her grandchildren as eggs to, for example, in this case with famine, to switch on fat storage.
Wow.
because she is setting her grandchildren up to survive in the world that she's had to survive in. Now, that's awesome. However, we live in a different world now. So, like a couple of generations on from grandma in a famine situation, there's no famine, but the fat storage genes are switched on. So that's like a big example. And then so the epigenetic tags from grandma sit dormant in our eggness, and then when we are conceived, it switches that all on. So we grow with that. And then we are epigenetically tagged during the pregnancy of our mother's pregnancy of us, for whatever we need to survive in her world. So there's a lot of red thread influence in our lives, and that's not bad. It's, again, as I said, it's how humans have made sure that the generations will survive. So the weird bit is, as I said, it's different worlds now. So your daughter, having been tagged by your mother, is going to be growing up in a whole different world, environment, series of things that are going to affect her that are so different from your mother's experience, but she's going to be organized around your mother's not ideas, but biological needs for survival. So it's cool, but it's kind of like it worked when we were all in the same worlds, and it's very different now. So just knowing that gives us a lot of information to prepare for our own journeys on motherhood. Like, in my workshop that I offer called The Shamanic Dimensions of Pregnancy, one of the preparation questions is, how do the women in your family give birth? Because you're simply the current story of whatever that is. And there can be deeply ingrained ways of responding or reacting to things that you don't even know you carry. So understanding your red thread story, the life your mother led and the life your grandmother led, and where your people come from, will give you a lot of information about how your body is running. That will show up when you are pregnant, birthing, and mothering. So know thyself and know where you come from and know the experiences that led to you being who you are, where you are, is part of the preparation for motherhood, pregnancy, birth, motherhood, that we all need to be doing. And like in our modern day, there is so much disconnection from family. Like with the work I do with women, I would have to say most have no idea about their grandmother's life, let alone their mothers. And sadly, so many women are estranged from their mothers. So our birth stories don't just tell one story. They're a multifactorial, complex weaving of all the stories that preceded us and make us who we are. So it's being aware of all the influences and impacts from that is so important in preparation for motherhood.
Do you share much on the patriarchal inheritance?
Ooh, yes. Well, that's very obvious. We can see in the birth statistics. But the patriarchal, well, let's just say first, the capitalist approach, capitalism rejects motherhood. That's just like, so motherhood is outsourced and women are back to work as soon as possible. That's how we contribute to and work within the capitalist society. Now, and that's part of the patriarchy. And in a patriarchy, so just what that means, that's the kind of culture we live in. And it's called a patriarchy because it upholds the masculine and the men, and not just men, the masculine way of being, and oppresses or suppresses the feminine way and women. And in a patriarchy, what we see, and this has been going on for millennia, like this is nothing new, and it's something that we don't necessarily know, but is fully influencing us. A lot of people use the metaphor, I'm going to remember this one, around culture being as if the water a fish swims in. You know, like the fish doesn't see the water and it's like it's just being itself, a fish. And then when the fish notices the water, say, it's similar to us noticing the culture that we're growing up in or living in. So the patriarchy. And the patriarchy has, there are some big clues about women and the feminine, especially our power, that we can see hiding in plain view in the patriarchy. And that is that anything to do with women or the feminine that's put down, feared, turned into a taboo even, or made invisible, or turned into a joke, is a clue that it holds great power. You know, menstrual blood, ew, yuck, menstrual blood, you know, just watch and see what's going on with menstrual blood in 5 years when they really start harvesting it and using its incredible
Stem cells and
yeah, all the stem cells, etc. You know, it's like the most worst plot for a terrible dystopia. We won't go there, but anyway, that
Have you
the
seen recently, do you know because all of the DNA testing kits, I've never done a DNA test because they're all sent to China. There's none that do them endogenously within Australia or within your country. They're all outsourced. And even like when I was having my daughter, I wasn't actually sure of the father of my child, and neither of the potential parents would get a DNA test because they wouldn't do them within Australia. They would send them all off to China. And now actually what's happening is they're saying they're utilizing these testing kits to actually test for alien genetics.
oh my god, oh
I'm
gee,
like, but I can see where it's all going, with cloning and whatnot. And yeah,
strange world we live
it
in.
is such a strange.
But we need to hold on to the basics, and you know what you're talking about, what your work is around, basically reclaiming birth and motherhood as a sacred aspect and dimension of us is so important, because in a patriarchy it just gets swallowed up and seen as all manner of risks that need managing. And it's a rite of passage, so whatever happens during the rite of passage will affect us forever. And a rite of passage is includes what happens, what doesn't happen, who's there, who's not there, what they say, what they don't say. All of that adds up on a subliminal level to teach you the value of that the culture holds in the role you're going into. So at birth, that's motherhood, and therefore how to behave to be accepted by the culture. And then we add in what's going on in your world at that time, and we saw that so bad in COVID. What we saw in COVID was like something that we must not forget. And the way it played out in Australia was that 10 people were allowed to a funeral, 5 people were allowed to a wedding, and 0 to 1 were allowed to a birth.
Mm-hmm.
So straight away we see birth and motherhood bottom of the barrel. Not important. Not as important as a funeral or a wedding. And like, that's fucked. And that affected all the women who birthed during that time, because they were not honoured at all. They were seen as vectors. They were the problem, because they were going to be infected or get infected or blah 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 blah. So I think that we had a big wake up call of how our patriarchal culture sees motherhood as, you know, kind of irrelevant, not worthy of mothers who are not worthy of care. You know, and then add all the mask shit and all the babies that grew up in that. You know?
Yeah,
Bad news.
I was in during that whole when I was pregnant. I was like right towards the end of my pregnancy and was just in a housing crisis in Byron Bay and couldn't find a home. I had to leave my home and move and couldn't find a place, so I had to end up going back to WA to where my family home was, which was all divine because I had to step into my family home, and that was a whole story and journey. But I flew across and
How
I
did
had
you
to
do
go.
that?
I know, but I had to go straight into quarantine. I was about to
Yes.
give birth, and they're
Oh,
like, I was like, can I not just drive 2 hours to my family home? They're like, no, you have to stay here. I was like, what if I give birth in the hotel? They're like, you just have to deal with it. Like, you just, I was like, okay. So I had to hold on, right at that
no.
last minute, and then no one could come to my attend my birth. Like, they wouldn't fly the father over, and it was just a mess. But I always laugh because my daughter loves chaos.
Well, there
And
you go.
she's
I was
like
just
this
going to say that.
chaos magician. She throws herself into the ocean when she can't swim and she loves it. She's ecstatic. And I feel like, okay, yeah, like that was all a part of her story and it's shaped her, or maybe she chose it.
Well, all the same thing, really. But that's the
Yeah,
birth imprint.
exactly.
I deviated from that. So, how we're born is with us forever and plays out all the time. And it's not just born, as I said, it's conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And so, we don't necessarily give birth how we were born, like that's your story, but it certainly does happen. But what we do see is our birth imprint playing out whenever we birth things. So in our
Mm,
creativity or in whenever we're engaged in a process, anything that has a beginning, a middle, or an end, our birth imprint plays out in. And so the story of our conception, which doesn't necessarily mean all the juicy details, it just means were you planned and were you wanted? Basically, however how many women I've talked to about this who say I was a mistake,
mm,
and
mm,
then that's their program. I'm a mistake. Some lucky women, or obviously the same thing for men, boys and men too, but I'm talking to the women and hearing their stories. But sometimes there's a yes, I was a mistake, but I was a happy mistake, or like something added to it, but a mistake is a mistake, right? And there's lots of terrible, I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's lots of sad information about the effect of being told that you were not wanted.
mm,
And like there are some specialties in medicine called pre and peri and postnatal psychology, and that's the people who look into all of this and see the effects of that. So, the story of our conception is often plays out in how we get ideas,
mm,
and then the story of the pregnancy of us, and it's got to be recorded chronologically. So whilst you can still remember, and any mothers listening, whilst you can still remember the details of the pregnancy of your children, write it down in chronological order because, maybe one day this fringe idea might get a bit more mainstream and people want to know this. And it's so easy to forget, especially if you've had lots of babies and you can't remember which one was which and all that. So write it down when you can remember. And what the experience, because the experience the mother has of the pregnancy, so does the baby.
mm,
Everything the mother experiences, the baby experiences, and it's recording it because as unborns, so from in utero up until 7, we learn from everything that our parents or important adults, influential adults do. We learn from them by this process called imprinting, where we just take whatever they do as the way to do it. And we don't question it, it's just how it works. And then we question it later, but in those first 7 years, we're just learning, imprinting by what they do is the way to do it. And so we're imprinting through the pregnancy of how mum handles whatever is how you handle whatever. And so the chronological story of the pregnancy of us will give us a bit of a map and kind of a recipe for how we make things happen. So the story of the pregnancy of us, like not you being pregnant with someone else, your mother pregnant with you, the chronological story of that is like how you make things happen, how you bring things to life, like in a process or a creativity. And then the birth, which is, from whatever starts it, whether it's a membranes rupturing, contraction, beginning of a planned cesarean, like whatever the start is, up until whatever the end is. And in a vaginal birth, that's the placenta being born. In an operation, it would be when you're out of the operating theatre, say. So the birth, which is what I just said, plays out in how you finish things, how you, so completely configured by how you made things happen during the pregnancy, but the birth is how you finish things. And so you want that the details of that birth chronologically as well. So like the classic thing is inductions of people who were induced often have difficulty starting things because they didn't start labor. And we know, like, I don't know how long we're going to have to know this and not take it into consideration, but we know that babies start labor. So when babies don't start labor, then they don't have that experience of starting labor, which then is part of their imprint of starting things. So like many people have that kind of problem or issue. It's not surmountable. Like none of this is a curse. It's simply a pattern to come to recognize so you can work with it rather than be worked by it. And working with it means probably bringing in what your mother didn't have during the time, or the healing or support or whatever. And then the postpartum, so the birth is how you finish things, the postpartum, first moon or month, is reflected in how you later, as a person, adult, whatever, how you look after the things you finish. So, or not. So the idea, what I have
I struggle with.
exactly, I bet. Okay. And for many generations, that will all be the same because of the stupid practices and policies of separating mothers and babies in hospital when they're born. Like that's been happening for long time. And that, when a baby's separated from its mother, that's dangerous for the baby. It's life in the jungle. And a baby without its mother is prey. So it's scared. So babies who are left without their mothers just kind of go quiet to not attract attention. And then they're seen as, oh, what a good quiet baby. Like it's probably in shock. So this birth imprint is so critical to understand the influence of your birth on you. And again, I'm meaning, conception all the way through to postpartum. And how that impacts you in everything that you do. But then the most important thing is knowing that when we're conceiving, gestating, birthing, and looking after our babies, we're creating their birth imprint in real time. So again, it's not a curse, it's a pattern. And neither is your red thread stuff a curse. So the things you've inherited from your mother line, because these things just get passed on unconsciously. But all it takes in a red thread is one woman to say, whoa, this stops with me. I'm going to be the one who does the inner work in my red thread to change the pattern. And that works, it affects, you do the inner work of healing all the things, then affects how you mother, how you interact with the generations to come, but also your mother and your grandma if she's still around. So none of this is a curse, and neither is the epigenetic tagging. It's all healable by all the things we know.
I've seen it in like real time in like this very quantum way with, the processes I've been through with my grandmother my grandmother's Chinese and she married an Englishman. And she had her father left their family of 5 and went and created a new family and basically left the mother to fend for herself and provide for herself. And she's got really strong rage, like unprocessed rage towards the masculine. And that's something that I almost repeated her story because we separated during my pregnancy and it was I like repeated her whole mythological journey. And every time I
Evidence.
went into acupuncture, I would be working on the deep grandmother channels and just having so much rage. But then I've watched how it's changed her when I've been processing it to the point where she could never tell me about her family. Like she couldn't discuss her father or where she's come from in China and share that with me. She had so much rage. And just recently I went back home and she just started sharing where the lands she's from. I've been trying to get that out of her for years because I want to go and visit, these lands. And she just started sharing about them. And I was like, wow, okay. And she wasn't even conscious of the change, but I
There
could
you
see
go.
it.
There you go.
So
Like
it's
that's
just
such
incredible.
a great example, So it's it's so impactful when we do the inner work. It
Yeah, and I just want to
changes the future and the past in a way.
just echo what you've said, in that it's not a curse. Actually, it is a gift if we know how to work with it, because we're
Totally.
gifted this opportunity to create profound change in our lineage.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And in at my age and stage in life, so I'm 68 and I'm at the end of my autumn season of my life, moving into crone and winter at 70. So very interesting to me, and I need to do some like-minded women research. My birth imprint, which is not very good, like it was in the 50s when they were doing stupid shit, you know, and using very bad drugs, and
Mm.
so my mother had twilight sleep, which was a drug cocktail that they used for birth, labor, for the pain, but it didn't do anything for the pain. It just made the mothers unable to remember it.
Yeah.
And so they would thrash around in labour, and so they had to wrap them with bandages so they didn't bruise
Jesus.
themselves, because that's how they got busted for this. They'd go home and they had bruises all over them. It's like, what has happened to you? And that unravelled the whole thing and changed birth practices in the 60s.
Whew.
However, the thing for me with that imprint is that the pattern that created, that I need to work with rather than be worked by, is that in the middle third of my labour, if you can get what I mean, is when my mother was like under the influence of those drugs. So whenever I'm making something happen, whenever I get to the middle third, I just lose it. I can't be bothered. I don't even remember why I'm doing it. I'm like, ah, blah, blah, blah. And before I knew anything about this, I would just keep going. But once I learned about it, I learned how to work with it, right? Me just keep going is being worked by it.
Mm.
If I needed to bring in what I needed at that point to work with it, which was to just step away from what I was doing and have
Mm.
ultimately a break from what I was doing, because that's what mum was kind of having. And the thing I'm trying to get to here is that that birth imprint pattern, the way I work with it, is actually what I need in my older age with all my chronic life situation, which we all have when we get to this point. And you can't blame menopause for everything. It's just life. So that pattern of me going like on, off, or go, rest, is actually how I need to live my life now to thrive. So that's kind of cool that your birth imprint might reveal the pattern you need to thrive in old age. But that's just a new theory of mine.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah.
Like it. Cool.
There's
I
so
had
much in this that
There's so much in it.
in the culture that we are in, that is actually terrified of birth more than anything, you know, and the way our culture does things when they're terrified of a process is to control it. And
Mm.
birth won't be controlled. It's not a it's a force of nature. If
Mm.
we can remember that birth, and I mean the whole story, is a force of nature, then it starts to get into its right, we start to get into right relationship with it. It's not just that random event. It's like the process where we, as the chosen ones, need to open to the birth force to let our babies come through in whatever way that happens, right? But that's not how we're supported in this day and age. You know, like right now in Australia, and it's not going to be that dissimilar, and maybe even worse in some places, about 48%, so less than 50% of women push their babies out of their vaginas under their own steam now. Like, that's fucked. That is not a sign of women's capabilities or the trustworthiness of the birth process. It's a sign of unnecessary intervention and women who are scared.
It's
And,
terrifying.
and, and practitioners who are terrified.
It's terrifying, and I just like when I think back to the conversation we've had today and the implications of that for future generations, it's like, oh, and where we're already at in terms of technology taking over and taking over bodies, I think, well, there's this link there,
Totally.
actually.
You know, there's like over 40% induction. So 40% of mothers, and a lot of them are the first timers, start their birth process knowing, with evidence from medicine, who's a form of God in our culture, that their body doesn't work. Like, that's not a good place to start motherhood. Oh, I don't work. I can't even go into labor. I can't handle the contractions. I can't breastfeed. Like, you know, to start the most important job of your life, doubting your abilities, is not what was supposed to happen. But it does open the way for more experts to show you how to do it.
Yeah, because once you go down that rabbit hole, it's just like one thing after the other.
Yeah, and I
I
mean,
was
this is not to disrespect help and experts, because, you know, often there's great outcomes from that. But to even set up this dependency, you know, we learn so much from our rites of passage of birth, particularly about how we access our inner knowing. And in this modern world, we're not encouraged to access our inner knowing. We're encouraged to outsource knowing to the experts. And again, I'm not wanting to disrespect experts, but experts are experts because they're experts on one thing. And
and it's
there
what
is
they're
no
told.
one thing.
It's not something that's been learned and lived through experience. Usually, it's what's been handed to them, which
But
is
also
one
just the
thing.
minute details of one aspect of it that's connected to all this other stuff that doesn't get seen. You know, I think most people see if their parents or grandparents have some sort of thing wrong with them, then how many different specialists are needed to deal with the problem, and none of them even talk to each other. So it's like holistic care in pregnancy, birth, and mothering is so essential. So it's not just about your nipple. It's not just about the contraction. It's so much bigger than that. And I think that often in our modern world, women meet this gigantic story of themselves for the first time when they get pregnant. And sadly, so many of us finally connect with the menstrual cycle for the first time when you're trying to conceive. Like, so many women that I meet, even in preparation for menopause, have no idea about their menstrual cycle, no idea how to know when they're ovulating. And I'm not trying to disrespect or shame anybody here. This is the culture's fault, because we live in a negative menstrual cycle culture, and a negative birth culture, and a negative menopause culture. So I'm hoping people see the pattern. You know, like, we are groomed to drug ourselves all through all of those. All of our portals of power, menstruation, childbirth, and menopause, have all been pathologized, medicalized, weaponized against us, and monetized, you know? So if women could see that, then I think they could be a little bit more suspicious of the absoluteness around it has to be this way and that way and whatnot. And if you don't do this, then, you know, you're risking this and blah and blah. Like, you know, like, there's a beautiful saying. It was prevalent when I was growing up in the birth world in my late 20s and early 30s. And it was by a famous birth photographer from America called Harriet Hartigan. And her quote was, "Birth is as safe as life gets." Like, you know, birth is not the problem. Look at the population on the planet. And most of those births don't happen with experts in institutions. They're happening in villages.
Potent. I've just seen Ollie's on the call. Did you want to share or ask anything? Ollie, hello. Thank you, Jane. I think I can just click that button and you can just
There you
Yeah.
go.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi. Thank you so much. Wow. I actually kind of felt like bursting into tears when you said it's not a curse.
Mm.
Yeah, that's wow. Um, but yeah, just briefly, um, I come from an I come from an Eastern European background. So my mum gave birth to me in the 60s as a migrant to Australia. I didn't speak English, but she was an orphan from World War II, so very traumatized woman on her own. So everything was on her own. So she came out here looking for a long lost brother who she found and stayed when she met my dad at a dance, and they got married and started a family. And but yeah, she had a horrific birth story because of all of that background, um, but also the way she was treated in hospital. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
just kind of left alone and um, yeah,
Yeah.
left alone screaming and not being able to communicate to anybody. And I'm the firstborn daughter to her.
Mm.
And so it's just incredible how much I've mirrored, my body has mirrored all her trauma.
Mm.
So my first period was like labor pain. It was just, yeah, I just had this awful chronic period pain all my life to the point of vomiting, diarrhea. I just
Mm.
have to remove myself and became allergic to all the painkillers. So
Oh.
there was no relief. So it's just incredible. So that kind of forced me to search deeper and try and extricate myself from the medical system, which was all laparoscopies and surgeries and
Well done.
miscarriages. And I was never able to have a child, unfortunately. But I
Oh.
think deep down, like listening to this stuff and delving deeper, I've believed I was cursed, and I've felt
Mm.
probably there was a deep fear of having a child. And so I kind of maybe shut it down somehow,
Mm.
subconsciously.
Yeah, that's a
Yes,
thing.
I'm sure it's a thing. I'm sure it's a
Mm.
thing. So
So,
yeah.
so in terms of working with your story, then what I would suggest is you
Yes.
write it all down. You know, like write down. So the story didn't start with your mother as an orphan. Like, where was your grandma? What happened to
Yeah.
her? Because you were in her body.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, grandmother.
yeah,
Grandmother was a traumatized woman too who didn't have a say to how many kids she'd have to have and living in subsistence farming and on a mountain somewhere in the freezing cold. Yeah.
and you
Oh,
had the opportunity to choose to have none. So, like, that's huge evolution in your red thread. You
wow,
know,
I never thought about it like that.
well, in freedom.
Yeah.
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 And then, so find out about grandma and then mum's life, which sounds like you know a bit more of.
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's still around and
Yeah.
yeah,
And
she's just and she's somebody that's always suffered to this day. There's just all this unexplained pain, and she's always at the doctor and always getting scans, and she can't find the source of the physical pain. I mean, I feel like it's her trauma, and we talk about that, but she's still very stuck in that cycle.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, as she will be until she isn't, you know, like
that's
so
right. That's right.
there's so much more information now about generational trauma
Oh
that's
yeah,
helpful, you know, and it may be that you're the one that does the healing on that, like Sigourney did and felt that with her
yeah,
grandmother, like maybe you do the work on it.
exactly.
But
That yeah,
if you moved forward realizing that you actually healed choice around motherhood in in your red thread in one generation, and
yeah.
that that your birth imprint is not a curse and you can work with it, then you know that's huge, particularly from a
Mm.
deeply patriarchal war trauma background.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah. Well, Mum's told me some stories, and yeah, it's worse than any movie you could
Oh, of
watch.
course. And so if her main one of her main things was being misunderstood and not therefore not supported during the process of you becoming,
Yep.
you know, you being born, then, you know, I'm going to guess that has a huge impact on you. And I would
For sure.
imagine and hope that you are incredibly good at communicating.
I am.
I bet you are.
Can hear it in the way you're communicating now. Also.
You know, like so you have worked with that to develop what I'm imagining is a superpower of communication in whatever ways, even
I
if
get
it's just
told
knowing
that.
from yourself. Pardon?
I do get told that.
Well, there you go. There you go. See, so that's not a curse. You've
No.
healed that. Your mother feeling so, like, imagine how devastating that is, her
Oh,
experience of birthing you. Like,
oh, yeah, and
huge.
yeah,
And
and
then that would have impacted your next sibling, and, until maybe
it
hopefully she
did.
got to a point where she could
Yeah.
actually be understood. But
Yeah, I think her experience with my brother was better. But I remember there's only a year between my brother and I said, Mum, how did you go and do that so quickly after what you went through with me? And she said, I knew that if I didn't do it straight away, I would never do it again. Like it was almost like she forced herself to have another child because if I don't do it now, I can't put myself through that again. So,
yeah,
yeah.
like, what a tragedy.
Oh, yeah, all the connotations around it was so painful and negative. And
Yeah.
so
And you're,
my
yeah,
body held that for a long time.
yeah. And you're not alone. Like, that's a
No,
common story.
I'm
And
sure I'm sure it is.
yeah, and sadly now as well. And not necessarily with a language barrier, just with an ignoring.
Yeah,
Like,
culture.
not enough people
Yeah.
to look after, and everybody thinking if they go to the hospital and have the specialist and whatnot, they're going to get the 5-star treatment. They're not.
No. I just found out about my niece's friend who just gave birth for the second time, and her specialist coerced her into having elective cesarean for the second time. And this child is full term, but is in an incubator with fluid on his lungs, as the first one did. And I'm like, why did you do that again?
Because she was told by the expert, like,
Yeah,
it's
like
pretty
your body
scary.
to do, so we'll do
Yeah.
it. You said earlier in the session
Mm.
today, we get told that, and that's how I felt when, as a teenager and a young woman, my body is my enemy because I'm in so much pain because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
My feminine was just like a curse to me. Why can't I just be a guy and get along with life? And look, they don't need. He's not compromised like me, but I used to have to plan my life around
Yeah.
my period pain.
Yeah. Great way to control us.
Yeah, it does work.
Totally. There's this fabulous quote. I mean, it's a terrible quote, but it's a great, useful quote from a woman who did a PhD on menstrual shame and how it affects childbirth. And
Yeah.
menstrual shame leads to increased intervention at childbirth. But the quote that she says, which is just so powerful, so horrible but powerful, menstrual shame is one of the organizing principles of the patriarchy to maintain the oppression of women.
Yeah. Wow.
And we can see that, right? You
Yeah, we
just told
can.
the story of it, and it's just
Yeah.
as prevalent. Like, I don't know if it's just as prevalent now as it was. Probably not, but still,
But
because
yeah,
there are,
women, yeah,
yeah,
women are being mistreated just as my mother was in a different way in this modern age where, like you said, we're supposed to be having access to all the best of the best. And this poor young woman who's had two kids, two healthy kids, full term, but it turned into, I just hate to think what her body's gone through with this elective surgery. I mean, I've had so much abdominal surgery, unfortunately, because I ended up having to have a radical hysterectomy
oh,
when I was 43 back in 2011 because the fibroids were so large. It was like a 9-month pregnancy and all my organs were all tied up in knots. So my body just kept protesting. It really, and it was obviously internalizing and growing something that I needed to
exactly,
pay attention to.
exactly. There's some
And yeah,
there's some thoughts behind fibroids and their kind of spiritual significance. And
yeah.
Dr. Christian Northrup, who is an awesome resource, she says
I
that,
love her book. She's
yeah,
got an amazing book. Yeah.
great book. So you
Yeah.
must have read that she says that fibroids are the babies that you didn't have.
Yeah. And yeah, the specialists couldn't understand it because fibroids are normally slow growing, but for
Mm,
me, they were like on steroids. So
mm,
they would remove one, and I would sort of be thinking, okay, I'll get rid of it and then I'll try and have a child. But the fibroid would be back. before anything could happen, and they were all scratching their heads. How could this be? And I just thought, there's something to this. There's something else to this.
You
Yeah.
know, there's some sort of idea in your mind, or that then means in your body, that not to have a baby.
It also makes so much sense to me because I've seen so many women heal from fibroids and endo from having children and carrying
Yes. That's
babies.
what they kept saying. Oh, all you need to do is fall pregnant and have a baby. And I go,
Easier
okay.
said than done.
And I went, great. And yeah, that wasn't to
But
be for
it's
me, but there was obviously so much else going on around that. And Sigourney's done a she's looked at my chart, my medical birth chart, and it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah, and let's remember, it's not a curse. It's the
Yeah, hearing
story.
those words today was so healing. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad, because, like, you know, my birth imprint with all that. Another part of my birth imprint is that my mother, like so many others, smoked all the way through her pregnancy.
Right.
And, you know, this is back in the time when doctors did ads in magazines. Smoke Marlboro, it's good for your health.
Lose weight.
Yeah,
Take
like
up
what?
smoking.
Exactly. So I think
They did.
that's really important for everybody to know how different medicine is every couple of decades. You know, like that was all about promoting smoking. So when a baby is in utero and the mother smokes, the baby learns that even her womb is a toxic place. So therefore, dot dot dot, the world is not a
Yes.
safe place.
Yeah, wow, of course.
Yeah. So, you know, like I had such an intense experience with all of those things. And I was also, like probably you, maybe not, no, you maybe not have, because your mother was bringing some cultural awareness. My mother was a expert mother. She was a 1950s mothercraft nurse. So
I remember Mothercraft,
yeah,
yes.
right. So 1950s mothercraft was fucked, you know, like
I bet.
controlling the
Weren't
baby.
they pushing formula? I
Not
think they were.
yet. I
Not
was
yet. Okay.
breastfed, but
Oh, that's
only like when on a routine, not my routine, you know.
of
So
course.
all of that stuff. So raised by
Oh,
those
wow.
sort of very basically, I had the world. The world, my mother's body is toxic, dangerous.
Yeah.
My birth experience with that, you know, those
Mm.
terrible drugs, and then this mothercraft control the baby stuff. So all of that. But I wouldn't be who I am, passionate about
Yeah.
what I'm doing, if that hadn't happened.
Yes.
I'm just
It's
thinking
so
of even
true.
the name of your work, Jane. Shamanic Womancraft, isn't it? And
Yes.
the rectification from Mothercraft to
The
that, using
Womancraft. She's
that as a
healed.
remedy.
She's healing it. She's
Yeah.
Totally.
healing it.
But still,
Yeah.
you know, seen within the dominant world is all a bit crazy. But I think that that's fine. We are.
Mm.
Anybody who goes against the dominant way will always be seen as crazy by the dominant way. And I would much prefer to be seen as that than
Yeah.
going along with it.
Yeah. Well, it guided me eventually. Back in the 90s, I started studying naturopathy and stuff like that just to try and look at other ways for pain relief and all of that. And then that didn't end up being my path, but I learnt so much from it. But I'm more on the energy medicine path the last few years. So I do something called biofield tuning, which uses tuning forks in the field.
Wow.
But strangely for me, what comes to me when I start tuning someone, when you're at the very edge of their field, it's usually their birth story, and that's the bit that usually resonates with me so strongly. I pick up so much in that area, and it's just crazy because I don't do talk therapy. I don't tell people to tell me stuff. I just feel it in the field, and that's when the birth story comes out. So
So
I'm
that's the
so
gift
glad
of
I
your
tuned
birth
in
story.
today with you
That's the
guys.
gift of your birth story. You know, like
Yes,
the other thing we all become. How old are you?
59.
Okay, so at about 54,
Mm.
which is like within the sphere of the average age for menopause. So I hear you,
Yep.
you had your ovaries out with your womb back
Yes,
when you were in
yes.
your 40s.
Belly
But
full.
in the early 50s, we have
Mm.
a few different astrological events, and the one I want to refer to I'm hearing in what you're saying is it's called our Chiron return. And Chiron is a celestial body that is represented by the ancient myth of Chiron, who's the wounded healer. Like there's a big story of what it means. But at 54 is a Chiron return. So that's when Chiron is back where it started on your natal chart when you were born, and is associated with the average age of menopause. And it's the time when you get your work in the world. And it's you as the wounded healer. So you're helping others heal what you need, what you've learned to heal in yourself. So, you know, congratulations.
Yeah, well, that was around the time that I
bet.
discovered this work and
Yes.
finally found the courage to do it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we can rely on for postmenopausal women, the courage to do it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I don't listen to anyone else anymore. The people pleasing is over.
Well done. Which you can imagine your mother would have had to do to survive.
Oh, literally to survive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Thank you.
Pattern breaker, you.
Thank you. Yeah, we all need to be, that's for sure. And I was very attracted to Sigourney's posts and work because of the spinal attunement stuff she does, and I'm really hoping that I get to do that one day, because I feel like it will work really well together with the other stuff I'm doing. So
beautiful. That's wonderful.
We're going into studying it with Oxford University and getting journals done on the work, on the impact of it on chronic pain in particular. So maybe you might even be a candidate for receiving it when we start doing this research.
Congratulations, Sigourney. That's just monumental.
Well done.
Monumental world stuff.
Busting into the system.
I hated being in the system. I was in the medical system for 8 years, so I've got a bit of a passion about taking it back into the institutions. So.
Well, it's like, you know, it's where change will happen from inside as well as outside. But for those who can maneuver their way into the heart of the beast.
Yes.
I have a knack for it. I like the dirty work, Jane.
I'm glad.
I'm a bit of a masochist.
No, maybe be careful. What are you? Not really a masochist. You're a... What else would be a nicer way of saying that? Not nicer, but truer. You're not a masochist. You're sacrificing yourself to do the work for everybody else.
To be a pattern breaker.
Yeah, I mean, that can look masochistic only because of the culture.
Yeah,
but you're brave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sigourney's got the credibility to them because she knows her stuff. She knows the science. Yeah. She's been in the system, so they can't bamboozle her with that stuff.
Perfect. Perfect.
I love it. Powerful.
All right, loves. I'm sorry to bring this to a halt, but I have to drive into Melbourne now. But thank you so much. Thank you for your story, Ollie. Thank you so much for your wisdom, Jane.
Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you both. So good to
Thank you, Sigourney, and
thank
just
you.
Awesome you.
Thank
awesome you too.
Well
Appreciate you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.